Hello.
Hello, Mr. Politician. This is Mrs. Travers. I'm calling to see if you can do something about the lights on Arlington Street. They've been out for the past 3 nights.
Mrs. Travers, Arlington Street. You say your lights are out. We'll get to you as soon as we can, Mrs. Travers. Thank you for calling. Why do they think I'll do something for them when they don't even care enough to vote? Hello.
Hi, I live on Myrtle Street, and the lights on our street have been out for at least a couple of nights, and I was wondering if there's something you can do to help me. My name's Joe Carboni.
Mr. Carboni, that's on Myrtle Street, huh? Mr. Carboni, yes, sir. The lights are out. We'll take care of it right away. Thank you for calling, sir.
We all need our elected officials working for us. Be sure to register to vote today. For information, contact your city hall.
When you're faced with a problem, you simply plug it into your mind and solve it.
Good evening, and welcome to Dead Air Live. For anyone who lives in a city, buildings, new buildings, and development is an inevitable part of the life of a city. Especially in a city like Somerville, where so much of the land is already developed, something new going up means something old coming down. Well, the obvious questions are who benefits and who loses, what is gained and what is lost. Tonight here on Dead Air Live, we're going to be looking at that issue in terms of the Red Line extension in Davis Square, and what is being gained and what is being lost. There are 3 guests with me here in the studio, and I'd like to be able to introduce them to you right now. First, next to me, is Garen Daly. Garen is the operator of the Somerville Theater, and he is also the secretary of the Davis Square Business Association. Welcome, Garen.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
The next guest that I'd like to introduce is named Ernie Greco. Ernie is a tenant residing in the Davis Square area, and he is also a board member for Somerville United Neighborhoods. Hi, Ernie. And now to introduce the other guests with us here in the studio, His name is Gene Scott, and Gene is an owner and operator of Scott's Garage here in Davis Square.
Nice to be here, John.
Thank you, Gene. Before we begin talking, obviously you all have an intimate interest in what's happening with the Red Line extension, both by virtue of being, two of you being businessmen in the area and a third being a resident there, and so you'll all be impacted in some ways that we're going to talk about. We have a tape here which describes more explicitly exactly what the new Buena Vista, what the development for that area will be. And this is to be an area, the Buena Vista area is an area of Holland Street and Buena Vista Road that will be demolished to make way for a new parking garage and an office building. Let's take a look at that tape and see what that's like. Everyone agrees that the Red Line subway extension will bring prosperity to Davis Square. To accompany the expected influx of money to the area, the administration of Mayor Eugene Brune is promoting its Davis Square Action Plan. This plan raises many questions both for the Davis Square and for the entire city. But the central question is, who will benefit from the Davis Square's new prosperity? One part of the action plan mandates the removal by eminent domain, if necessary, of 14 businesses and homes now located on Holland Street between the Somerville Theater and Buena Vista Road. On this site, generally referred to as Buena Vista, the city plans to build a 240-car garage using federal funds and to contract with a private developer for an office retail building which is 40 to 50,000 square feet. To the mayor's office, the Buena Vista redevelopment represents progress. However, to some whose prosperity is being eyed for seizure, the project seems like an attempt by well-financed and well-connected developers to grab what has suddenly become some very valuable property. Well, with that as a kind of backdrop for the Buena Vista area, getting a lot of feedback in here. I wonder if you could each say a little bit about what we're talking about is this new parking garage and office space that's going to be put up, according to the plan, in that area. I wonder if each of you could say, as businessman, resident, businessman, how you'll each be affected by that. Garen.
Okay, I'll go first. Well, I think I'm going to be impacted very beneficially. The Red Line will allow me to take the base of my theater from being something of a sub-regional level to a regional level. It means that we'll be drawing more and more people into the square, and we're able to save a historic site. The Somerville Theater was built in 1912. It's one of the last of the great theaters in the greater Boston area. The rest of them are all being twinned or turned into small little cubicles called movie theaters. So as far as my business is concerned, I'm very hopeful that the Red Line extension will be positive, and I think that the Buena Vista project with the additional parking will allow Davis Square commercially to enjoy a renaissance, especially at night.
Okay. Ernie, resident of the area, how do you think you as an individual will be affected by it?
Well, the parking garage and the new retail office building or whatever, I think the kinds of questions that a lot of us have in the area and other parts of Somerville as well is, for example, is the garage simply going to bring more congestion to an already congested area? Is it simply going to be a place where suburban commuters can drop off park their car and drop off their spouse or loved one or whatever, park, take the subway on into Cambridge or into Boston to work, and simply use it as a kind of dumping ground for people who really don't live and work in the area, who don't really have the concerns of the Davis Square or Somerville at heart, but simply see it as a convenient place to leave their cars while they go spend their money and spend their time elsewhere. So I am not at all convinced that the parking garage is going to be beneficial for people who live in the area, for that and for a number of other reasons.
Gene, we obviously all have a lot more to say about this.
Sure.
As an immediate reaction, how will you be affected?
Disastrously. It means the end of my business career in Somerville for sure. And my total life's work will go right down the drain. I'm just a private businessman who's, you know, worked in that particular building for 33 years. And if I lose that building, I lose my pension. This is what, you know, when you get around to talking about real life situations, when you get to be in your late 40s, you start thinking about, you know, what your future is. And my future is in that building. And when I lose that building, I lose the rest of my life. And I've worked hard for that. You know, and I don't think it's fair that they can come in and just take it away from me without any real valid reason. I don't find a parking garage, as Ernie says, for commuters or even an office building for somebody else to do business in. I'm doing business, and my business is extremely important. Heck, everybody's driving a car and everybody needs it fixed. And they certainly shouldn't have to look all over Somerville and all over Arlington and Medford to find a place they can fix their car when I'm perfectly suited to fix it. I've been doing it for many, many years, very successfully. I'm an extremely successful businessman. You know, I have as much right to stay in business as anybody in Davis Square, if not more. I've been there longer. If length of time in an area is a criteria for seniority where you would stay, I've got more seniority than anybody. You know? So I see no reason whatsoever for my demise.
What is, which I've read a lot in the paper, by eminent domain? It was mentioned that, let me just ask my floor manager something. We're having a lot of problems with the sound. Is that a fair assumption? Okay. Okay, so let me just apologize to people watching because there's some problems with the sound, but we're working on it. So, how will the businesses be removed? I mean, what is this, if necessary, by eminent domain? You're saying that you don't want to sell, obviously.
No, yes,
what does this thing, eminent domain, mean?
I've never ever had the place for sale, and I've never had any desire to leave my area whatsoever.
Any of you know what that phrase means? I really don't know.
Eminent domain, I believe, I'm not sure if it's the correct legalese or politicalese, but it's basically the state has the right to take over someone's land. Just very summarily.
State, meaning government?
State.
In general.
I believe it's the state and or the federal government. I don't think it's local government, but I could very easily be wrong.
Yeah.
You probably know more now about it than I do.
No, I really don't. All I know is that I want to keep my property and they want to take it away from me. And that it is supposed to be, you know, for the public use. That was the original concept of eminent domain. If they wanted to put a highway through someplace, if they wanted to put in a park or put in a school or a fire station or a police station, they had the right to come in and say, look, we need your land for a legitimate public purpose. And people had to give up their property. Apparently in the last few years, I really don't know the history of it, this broad concept of the greater public good, whatever the heck that is, has come into play, and now they're just grabbing up people's land whenever they feel like it under this very, very broad law, which dictates that if you happen to be in the way of somebody who's well-financed, you're gone, and they're in. And that's extremely unfair, and I would think unconstitutional, and apparently it is being challenged in the Supreme Court, but God knows how long it will take to adjudicate the thing.
Beyond, obviously, for people in Buena Vista like yourself who are at risk for losing their livelihood, can you talk about other effects that the office building and what's going to replace that, I guess, the office building, the retail space will have on that area?
Well, I think that Gene's case raised a larger question about what kind of development is being envisioned for Davis Square or for Somerville. Who decides what development in fact means, what progress means. It raised the question, for example, is Mr. Scott going to lose his property? They're going to take property away from a small businessman in order to sell it to a bigger businessman. I mean, eminent domain usually isn't used for that kind of a purpose. I think a question can be legitimately asked by people in Somerville and people in Davis Square about what kinds of businesses are supposed to be located in this new office retail building. Who are the businesses designed for? There is a conception floating around City Hall, and I think particularly in the Office of Planning and Community Development, that there are certain kinds of businesses which should no longer be in Davis Square, that the new Davis Square doesn't have room for them, the new Somerville doesn't have room for them, so-called family businesses, the mom-and-pop businesses, whatever, but that other kinds of businesses are more suitable for the new clientele, the new customers, the new consumers. And I think we can legitimately ask those kinds of questions. What kinds of, who's going to own this new office building, retail space, and what kind of retail space? Why are these businesses more suitable or more desirable than Gene's business, which he's had for I don't know how many years now, but why is this business not appropriate and these other businesses are for Davis Square?
You mentioned community development. I think I'll pick up on that because we had invited the Assistant Director of City Planning, Mark Bernard, to appear on this show with the other panelists who are here tonight. Mr. Bernard declined, saying he didn't think it would serve any productive purpose for him to appear with Gene Scott. However, Mr. Bernard did agree to appear on tape. Here's what he had to say about the city's plans. And when we come back, I'll invite people to call in. I'll give you the number, and we would welcome your comments and questions at that time. And now, let's look at the videotape. I am being, are we still here? Live? Okay. I am being cued that I have introduced the wrong tape. So you will, you will hear from Mark Bernard, but you will not hear from him yet, but the reasons will still stand why he's not here. First, instead, we will go to some on-the-street interviews, which the Somerville Producers Group had with people in the Davis Square area. And now, let's see that tape.
Against development of Davis Square, I think that's inevitable, and I don't think that's negative necessarily. I think it's wonderful the red line's coming through and more people are going to have access to Boston from here. What I think is really unfortunate is that so many local people are being displaced by outside business and that no compromise plan is being come up with where some money could be given to local people to develop what they have rather than kicking them out.
This whole entire block is going to be an office building. How do you feel about that?
I think it's unfortunate. I think right now this block provides a lot of space for people to come together. There are bars and restaurants and shops that are more localized. To have a large office building is going to break down a sense of neighborhood here.
You have anything else you'd like to say about the project?
No, but I just hope that something can be done to make it more of a cooperative effort between the community and the builders rather than just bulldozing.
I know you're located right across the street from where they're planning to do an office building and a parking garage. What do you think of that plan?
Well, not a whole bunch. I don't like it that much. I had enough problems when they were building the subway up the street. And now if this is going to go up here, it's really going to hurt my business, I think.
And what other effects do you think it will have on your business, the fact that there will be a large office building and retail space across the street from you?
Well, I'm sure it's going to hurt the rent situation here. I'm sure that my rent's going to go up and everyone else's rent is going to go up, and it's going to force a lot of the small businesses out of the area.
What do you think that will do to the character of Somerville?
I think it'll change it a lot. We don't really need a lot of big companies around here. This has always been small business area, you know.
Okay. The only thing I really don't like is for a parking garage. I don't think a parking garage really is going to have the effect that the city wants it to. I think they're talking about putting a four-story high-rise building in here. I think that would probably be the most beneficial.
After 10 years, I feel I'm established here, and I'm really not looking forward to moving, but I am only a tenant here, and I really don't have any say as far as, you know, leaving the building, but I wish I didn't have to.
Are you going to lose a lot by this plan?
I think so, after being in business for 10 years, and I do not know where I'm going. I hope to relocate in the city. But
what do you think the city should be doing with this project?
I think the city should wait and see how the MBTA is going to work out before they knock down the whole block and realize they might have made a mistake. It hurt a lot of people.
And do you think that the office building is going to be a good idea for the square?
I think anything that it builds, increase the crowd on the square would be good for any of our business in the square.
What about the parking garage?
The parking garage, I have mixed of opinions into that. I don't want to go very extended into it. I think it will benefit a great deal the commuters to the T, and also a great deal for the business in the area.
So you think that it's going to help business?
it can't hurt it.
What would you do if your business was being taken to build this office building and parking garage?
I would be just the same condition Gene Scott is today, that it's very difficult for him to find a similar location which has been established over here for half a century. I won't like to be in his shoes. As part of the business community, we just can't stop the factor of development in the area. We have been reluctant to, do something in the area for a long time. And this is the greatest opportunity of all that we have.
Do you think that the businesses that are there now that are going to be relocated, that this plan is fair to them?
Let's hope it's fair to them. Let's put it that way.
But they're going to put a parking lot over here and then a mini mall. And I don't see why the two bars over here shouldn't have first crack at it. Why should some other stranger come in and take priority over it? They're nuts.
Is there a plan for another bar in this project?
I think there is, yes, from what I've heard, yes.
You don't think this is a fair kind of a deal?
I think it's rotten.
After the subway was to open, if you were allowed to keep this land, what would happen to it at that point? What would you anticipate?
Well, ever since buying this property, I've improved it. I live upstairs. I bought it. It was pretty much an empty shell. Hadn't been used for about 3 years maybe, just by the looks of things. And now it's fully occupied. People live here. It's it's a functioning piece of property. It's my home. If the plan falls through and I happen to stay here and the building stays here, the improvement will continue.
Do you expect that this will be more financially advantageous to you after the subway opens?
Oh, I would expect so, that there would be a larger interest commercially in this property, yeah.
What will happen to your tenants?
If they are relocated, they'll be relocated. I really don't know where they'll go.
Hi, we're back live now, and let me invite our viewers to give us a call now. Our number here is 628-6750. And any thoughts, comments, questions you have about the Davis Square redevelopment as it's proposed and what you think about it, we'd like to hear from you. Couldn't really get a chance to look at the on-the-street interviews, so it'll be hard for us to comment on that. But during the on-the-street interviews, we were talking about some different things. I was asking about, had any of you gone to the public hearing, and if so, what had gone on there? I think, Garen, you had gone, and Gene, you said you had both gone. What happened there? When was it? What happened?
Well, it was, I believe that was in late March, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Late March, and over 100 people showed up at an alderman's meeting, which is, rather a rare thing to happen. And over 90% of them were opposed to the project. And most of the aldermen who would volunteer how many phone calls they had received, volunteered the fact that most of the phone calls, running 20 and 30 and 40 to 1, were opposed to the project. And the intervening time between that and the final vote, the same thing was true. More and more phone calls were received by the aldermen, and letters, and all sorts of on the street and where they met people, communication, and the overwhelming majority of people they met were opposed to the project. Nonetheless, the project went through. A recent situation up at City Hall involved the Mako people who have a shop down on Lowell Street. And the people down there were incensed with this, automobile repair business, that they're parking all over their streets, they're causing all kinds of trouble. Some of the aldermen who voted against me voted for them. And, they're causing their neighbors all kinds of problems. I've never caused any of my neighbors any trouble whatsoever. I've been a perfect neighbor and enjoyed a tremendous relationship with all my neighbors. And the aldermen saw fit to put me out of business. I find it incongruous, I guess is the word.
Well, when we talked at the beginning of the show, clearly, Garen, you talked about the from your standpoint as a businessman there, and obviously not one of the businesses subject to be removed, you had a lot to gain by the Red Line extension.
Correct.
Do you two see things for Davis Square to be gained by the Red Line extension? Is it all, obviously, if it means the end of your business,
I don't have to leave. It would be a heck of a boon to my business. I mean, my business would improve, dramatically, because Davis Square is a crossroads. It always has been an excellent transportation crossroads. You can go in any direction from Davis Square to Medford, to Harvard Square, to Arlington, up Elm Street, up Highland Avenue to Leachman. It's always been an excellent place for somebody to drop their car off at my place and then take the bus to work or whatever. And so it's even going to be better now. I mean, people can drop their cars off and go any place they want on the subway or take the feeder buses. The original concept of this whole doggone plan was that the people who came to use the subway were supposed to come on buses. Suddenly, the OPC decided that wasn't exotic enough. They needed a glass and concrete tribute to their genius, so they developed this wonderful plan. And the heck with the people coming on the buses. Let's see if we can draw in some of these people in their automobiles. So Davis Square needs automobiles like it needs a hole in the head. I mean, automobiles are no good for Davis Square. The people who come there should come by bus. That was the original intent.
I kind of want to ask you the same question, Ernie, but just quickly, if I can, for people watching the show, please, again, invite you to give us a call. Our number here is 628-6750. So do you see something on the plus side for the Red Line extension as a resident?
Well, the Red Line clearly, it seems, is going to increase business activity in Davis Square. I mean, that we can pretty much assume. But I think the concern is, again, whether those small shopkeepers, whether those small businesses, those family businesses who stayed in Davis Square, who sweated through the lean years in Davis Square, who've been hurt by the shopping malls, who've been hurt by everything else, who've had declining businesses, now there's a potential for some kind of increased business activity, or so they say. And again, it still needs to be proven, but there's a potential for increased business activity, and there is a conception, again, that some of these businesses probably should no longer be there, that they're not going to be able to afford the new rents, they're not going to be able to continue to serve their clientele, their customers, their lifelong patrons, because they don't belong in the new Davis Square. And I think if there is going to be any increased business activity, then certainly those small family businesses who've been there for a long time, suffered through the lean years, now ought to be able to benefit somewhat by this increased prosperity if it comes.
What's been, you're all familiar with that area, what's been the history of those stores on Holland Street? I mean, are those stores that haven't been that successful, have a lot been empty, or some of them clearly?
Very, very successful. I mean, when that article came out in January of 1981, suddenly announcing that we were all going to get torn down, there was full occupancy in all of those stores, and there had been for many, many years. There's more. We've had better occupancy in those stores and those businesses in that area than the stores in the in-square stores. I'll guarantee you that in the last 10 years, we've had maybe a 3 or 4% vacancy rate in our area, and the square has probably had a 14% or 15% vacancy rate. And we've always had a thriving business area there. I mean, it does very well. Everybody, for many, many years, when I was a kid, I mean, everybody used to walk to Davis Square for, a multitude of reasons, banking, shopping, whatever. And they, walked down to Holland Street. And it's always been a very, very busy place.
Yeah, I tend to disagree with some of
Yeah,
the
but
stuff.
how long have you been here?
I haven't been here that long.
I've been here for 47 years. 47 years.
Perhaps some
every day of 47 years.
Perhaps fresh eyes and perhaps a different perspective is sometimes needed. Davis Square has the potential for being a vital economic asset to the community. A lot depends, and there are a lot of ifs, and there will always be ifs, but the fact of bringing in more business is going to help the community as a whole, supplying maybe better restaurants, more and different varied products to be offered to people. The business climate in the square right now is one of a siege mentality. They've been bombarded for a long time. In 1955, it was the Stars Market Park in Porter Square. That seemed to knock the wind out of a lot of people, and there's been a general decline since like 55.
That hasn't been the fault of the people in the Buena Vista area out there. We've been doing fine. It's been going great.
What do you think, Aaron, about the
Why put out the best area to save the worst area?
I think you have to take a close look at what other areas have benefited by such an area, such as the Quincy station, which has office building and parking lots, and how has that community been impacted upon it? I don't know all the figures on that, but that would be something that I would look at very closely. There must be other areas that have been.
An article in the Globe about a month ago said that people were going to lay down in the damn streets in Quincy to block the people from using the parking garage. That's how successful that's been. I mean, the people who live in the area are the ones to be concerned. The businesses are important, and we're all in business. We need to make a living. But you have to, the character of the square will be destroyed, and the people who live there will suffer if this thing goes through. They really will. There'll be more cars.
I can equally say that the more traffic in here will make better business and make a better...
More traffic will make, God, the poor people.
If I could jump in for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Again, the question is, if it's going to increase business activity in the square, the subway, etc., the question I would have, and that some people in Somerville United Neighborhoods would have, is that why shouldn't those small businesses, those businesses who maybe haven't done real well in the last few years, why shouldn't they benefit from this perspective, increase in business activity, the new shoppers that the subway is going to bring? I mean, some businesses will benefit, but I think some of the businesses that may benefit may be businesses that are not yet there. Retail stores, retail chains, franchises, large corporations who are going to franchise in the area, that they may cash in on any increased business activity. But why not those people who've been there and struggled through the hard years? For example, when I went to a meeting once with Mark Bernard of OPCD, he argued that if one store, one business improves, that kind of helps the store across the street and all the others. For example, if people go to your theater, then that might help some of the mom and pop stores down the street because they may run out and get something, etc. But my question is, those particular businesses are going to be asked to leave or pushed out or driven out or torn down, as in some cases, just when there's a potential for increased business activity, if there is a potential.
So I'm sometimes very simple. It takes me a long time to figure this out. What you're telling me then is that because the red line is coming in, all the small stores are going to be pushed out.
Correct? No, my concern, first of all, some stores are actually going to be torn down. Some stores, the plans for the redevelopment of Davis Square, as I understand it by reading the brochure put out by the city, by the OPCD, by listening to some of the conceptions that some people have about what the new Davis Square will look like, involves what can only be referred to as not just residential gentrification, but commercial gentrification, in which certain kinds of businesses designed for higher income people, other kinds of families, etc., push out, exclude those businesses that either because they appeal to a different clientele. And I think the city has not been clear about that. And if you read some of their literature, they envision some stores leaving the area, and that it would be desirable for some stores to leave the area and new kinds of stores to come in. And I think if there's going to be increased prosperity in the area, then those people who've sweated, as I said, sweated through the hard years should partake of some of that increased business activity.
I agree with that. I mean, everyone who works hard should reap the benefits of what they've worked for. But I think, again, that businesses that are forced out, or I'm not quite sure how they're losing their business there, but if there's a demographic change, all right, then they either have to adapt or they will lose their businesses. This is, in general, we're not talking about Gene's Place. Gene's Place, I think, is a very special case. I mean, no one wants to see Gene Scott lose his business. I mean, the business association that I represent does not want to see a good business such as Gene Scott lose his business. I mean, that's very, very hard.
But there are some businesses you would like to see driven out? Is that what you're saying? I mean, which of the businesses that don't belong
is well taken. The natural process of people trying to do business and struggling, and if they can't survive, they go out of business. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And I have no argument with that. I'm not being allowed to struggle and go out of business. I'm being thrown out of business. I mean, that's my problem. I mean, I've been perfectly successful, intend to be successful. I don't fix Mercedes and Jaguar. I fix Chevrolet and Ford. But I'm certainly as necessary as a French restaurant or I mean, hell, I have my place.
Let me cut in for a second, because
Sure.
there's a lot more to be said. We do have a phone call, and they've been waiting. So let me go to that call. Hello, you're on Dead Air Live. Did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I sure have.
Uh-huh. Can we hear it?
I'm with Green. Gene Scott, definitely. We do not need that ripped down. We do not need a parking garage. Why not give it a couple of years to see what does happen? I've been here a lot longer than that man that bought the Somerville Theater.
Mm-hmm.
He can get up and leave anytime he wants. I can't. I own a home here.
Do you live in the Davis Square area?
I certainly do. I live on Irving Street.
Uh-huh.
And all those strange cars are going to be coming down this street, parking in that garage and going to Boston, not Davis Square.
Do you wish they didn't have the red line extension at all, or do you see some benefits from it?
As far as the red line is concerned, that's there now. We can't do anything about that. But I hope and pray to God we can do something about that parking garage. We don't need it. There's nothing in Davis Square to park there to go to. Why don't we get something there first and then put the garage up?
Well, I'm sure people would agree with that.
And that
Can you
parking
hold on the
garage-
line for a second and give people a chance to comment?
Sure.
Okay. Any comments? That's when you don't
Well,
have to.
I could agree wholeheartedly with all of
I
that.
thought you what a surprise.
It's purely farcical to build a parking garage in Davis Square. If you've had any experience in the years when it's snowing out, and the sidewalks and the snowbanks in Holland Street, it's for some reason or other an extraordinarily narrow street. Anybody who's coming from Arlington, there's only 3 ways to get towards Boston or Cambridge: Massachusetts Avenue, Holland Street, or Broadway. And most of them come through Davis Square. If Davis Square is plugged, they go up Broadway. And it's just going to create more and more traffic. And in the wintertime, it's absolutely impossible. When 2 buses meet on Holland Street, forget it. You just can't move. And that's now. When additional traffic starts to come with these people dropping people off at the station, the traffic is going to be incredible. And to build a parking garage is unbelievable.
Any comment to this caller, and we can...
Well, I think she's entitled to her opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had really good theater down there once. Live was really, really...
Well, we would like to do live again, and we're trying very hard to bring
Depends on what kind of live you have.
I'm sure that's true too.
Well,
it also depends whether the community will support it,
Well,
and that's important as well.
All right, well, thank you for calling in. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, I had earlier on introduced a tape of Mark Bernard, and it wasn't there, so I think I'll try again. And as I said before, Mark Bernard had been invited to be on the show, but felt like it would not serve any real productive purpose for him to be appearing on the show with Gene Scott here at this point. However, he has agreed and did agree to appear on tape, and here's what he's had to say about the city plans.
Could you tell us who you are and what your job is and how long you've been doing it?
Sure. I'm Mark Barnard. I work as Assistant Director for the Office of Planning and Community Development. I've worked for the office in different capacities for about 5 years now.
Mark, according to a 1983 federal grant application submitted by your office, the Buena Vista site is an area containing vacant, overcrowded, and non-conforming land use, having a blighted influence on the commercial district. The storekeepers in this area maintained that all the stores on this block were fully occupied until your office started talking about taking the land. How do you explain this apparent contradiction?
Well, I think that the reference in the application you're talking about is a result of a number of inspections that were done by our office, by the building department, and by the city's fire marshal. As to whether or not the stores were all vacant up until the time we make this announcement, we've been doing vacancy studies down there year after year, and there always have been vacant stores in Davis Square, including that block, mostly due to just a general decline in the area and then the impact of the T construction. Certainly since this has become closer to being a reality, I'm sure that there may have been some increased rentals, but inspections that were done by the building department and the fire marshal along the lines of the state urban renewal legislation show that there were substantial code violations, environmental deficiencies, which might mean an unimproved road, such as Buena Vista Road, an unlicensed rooming house without a proper second means of egress, such as present there, a 4-family house that has 8 families living in it without a proper means of second egress, outdated and just unimproved property, which I think I have a board that I brought. If you start to look around the area, there may be businesses or retail areas or property that is in good repair, but when you take the area as a whole and look at these inspection reports, there were serious enough deficiencies. There is some vacant land. There are some buildings that are built lot line to lot line. There are buildings such as warehousing that is not permitted without a special permit in that area. You can't have unlicensed rooming houses. There are a number of bar rooms. So when you add it up, it tends to be of a character and a nature that does inhibit the commerce, straight commerce of the area.
Would it be fair to characterize this project, the Buena Vista project, as the taking of private property from some people and selling the property to other people for their private uses?
No, it wouldn't be fair to characterize it as such at all. I think that that becomes a very basic and simple interpretation of eminent domain, which, you know, as I sat here casually talking with you, I might say that that's the underlying concept, but the underlying concept of an eminent domain taking is that it's for a public purpose. And starting on this project, where 50% of the project really goes to a public parking facility, actually more than 50% of it, there's the beginning, initial, or rooted public purpose. The other public purpose is to eliminate land use conditions that are inhibiting healthy growth within a city, not for some private property owner, which inevitably some private property owner would benefit out of something there, is to assemble property that a private developer would not assemble, to change a land use pattern that would not change because of mistakes of the past, and get a better deal for the citizenry. I mean, we're not just talking about some private developer making a huge profit here. I don't think that the issue for us more is that we can substantially increase the amount of taxes that the property pays to the city for schools, police, and fire. We can substantially increase the number of jobs that are available there, whether they're local residents or not. And we can successfully alter a land use pattern that I think will cause the city problems in the future. So it also is quite possible for all the landowners that are within that area now to band together separately as a development organization and to answer the city's call for development proposals and compete. There is no way within the legislation that we can say we're going to give it to a Mr. Scott or a Mr. Wilginen or a Mr. or Mrs. anybody. It has to be taken for a public purpose and sold in a free market situation. That doesn't prevent any of those owners from coming in and being the developer if they wish to be, and getting whatever favorable consideration they would get from the city because they're local residents, although I should also point out the majority of the people there are not local residents, they are absentee landlords.
The task force, among the task force's recommendations was that relocation arrangements and land purchase settlements take into account a fair anticipation of future value. Does the city plan to follow this recommendation?
The city is pretty much tied in to what they can or can't do with making purchases with public money. I mean, we're in the business of spending all of our money, public money. So the rules that are set down are fairly straightforward. There's not as much latitude. So we are bound to follow a process that, as far as the courts are concerned now, quite through to the Supreme Court, is fair and equitable. And that's the HUD Uniform Relocation Act and Massachusetts Chapter 79A on relocation and payment for private property. So, in my opinion, it's fair assessment of, it is an assessment of fair market value.
That's present value?
Present value at time of sale, which is all anybody would really pay anybody for sale. In other words, it's fair, for instance, it's fair market value at time of sale. It's difficult to say how much, let's pick a bar room, for instance, how much more a bar room on a single piece of property without any land area is going to be worth in 5 years because it's next to a subway station. Almost impossible to predict. 4 years ago, real property was appreciating along with inflation rate, 10 or 12% a year. Right now, it's at 3 or 4% a year. If we were to guess 10% and it were 3%, well, then we would have wasted substantial amounts of public money for single private landowners who were purchasing property from's benefit. If any landowner is not happy with the settlement, then beyond that, there's a whole realm of court action that's available to them to get a fair settlement. We intend to go to the maximum allowable under law to make a fair settlement for the value of property and the payments to relocate businesses elsewhere so that they can continue to operate as businesses successfully. We've done it in the past. It's done throughout the country daily, and we hope to make it, in this instance, as painless a process and as fair a process as we absolutely can.
If this project is completed, what effect do you think it will have on the commercial and residential rents in and around the square?
I think that it's difficult to connect it too much with the residential rents. I think they have been responding a lot to just housing markets in general, the cost of housing in Cambridge and the lack of availability. And so rents have been going up in Somerville mostly in response to the housing market, not even directly in response to the subway opening, although it makes it more attractive an area to look at. So I can't speak a lot about how this commercial project will affect residential rents. Commercial rents, it should set a tone for existing property owners or existing merchants that own property, and there are a lot in Davis Square. There are a lot of property owners that actually are merchants as well, to secure better rents. Right now there are a lot of marginal kinds of uses in Davis Square that I don't think benefit a lot of the area residents. They don't give a full range of shopping. There isn't, for instance, a family shoe store anymore in Davis Square. There isn't very much choice in shoes, shopping, books, camera supplies, whatever it might be. There's a real narrow range of services in Davis Square, and I think the only way that that's going to change is if merchants out there, commercial, retail people out there, view Davis Square as a better place to do business. And then services will come in that offer more to the existing community. I mean, we have no pretenses about this being a Harvard Square or a big, we're just trying to let Davis Square reach its own ceiling. And by doing so, provide the immediate area residents. 50% of the people that shop in Davis Square walk. 20% take the bus in. Better service, which they haven't had for years. So I think that the commercial rents could stabilize, which would be one good thing, and increase. And that would be of benefit to some and certainly a not benefit to others.
The Davis Square Task Force recommended that the establishment of a supermarket should precede any more ambitious development project on the Holland Buena Vista parcel, and that if there was no food store, there should be no office building. That's a quote from their recommendations they submitted to the Board of Aldermen. Does the city intend to follow this recommendation?
Absolutely. I think that that's always been a key issue raised. We've never stopped, never let down on our efforts to bring in a food service to the phone company. One of the first efforts we made was to convince the MBTA to build an additional 40 or 50 parking spaces next to it, which will greatly enhance its marketability. We've made our point very clearly with the phone company. Last week, for instance, Mark Boyle and I took kind of a broker, an existing market operator, and his supplier, along with the New England Phone Company's real estate people, on an hour-and-a-half tour through the facility. We have a second person coming in next week. What we found with that project was that there wasn't an immediate interest in it. We really had to beat the bushes to get someone who wants to put a food store in Davis Square. So we've been moving on all the elements of that plan simultaneously. Some require more front end, more lead time, like an office building or a parking garage, than others. But in no way will we abandon our efforts to secure a food store there. It may, if it does occur, and we are lucky with either one of these two people, it would be occupied as a food store long before an office building or parking garage were built.
It won't necessarily precede the development of the office building, office retail space.
It can't necessarily be said and done and then start the process that would bring in the office and parking, because, as I say, the parking is, the Buena Vista project is a project that would take 2 years from the time that you really start to the time that you're really nearly complete, whereas the phone company might be a matter of 6 or 8 months from the time you secure an operator and renovate it successfully and occupy it as a food store. So I think we're right on target here. Again, if we're successful with the food company and the market's out there, I think we'll have market operating in the phone company before a car parks in a garage in Davis Square.
Hi, we're back live, and let me again invite viewers to give us a call, 628-6750. We just heard a videotape presence of Mark Bernard. maybe we can clear one thing up. We were talking during the tape about, there was a mention of building code violations. You had some thoughts on that, Gene? And there were some problems in the Buena Vista area.
I understand in the
with
Buena Vista area
violations.
there are some building code violations, and there was a suggestion that there's a house there that has 8 living units in it when it should only have 4 or 2 or whatever. And if there's any, it's not the house that I own, and I don't know of any code violations in the building that I'm in, and I don't know of any around me, but if they found some, they should remedy the situation by taking the people to court if necessary and fix the violations. I don't see any necessity to tear everything down because there's some code violations in some of the buildings. I'm certain there's code violations all over the city, and I don't know why this area should be suddenly picked out as having a couple of code violations and should definitely be torn down. I mean, that's absurd.
Some difference before, obviously, in terms of your positions and what should happen. And it seems to me one of the things that we're talking about is, can you discriminate between what's for the greater good of the Davis Square area and Somerville versus what's in the interest of individual, both homeowners and individual business people in the area, and sort of how do you balance that out? One of the things that in that line that's used, I know, by the city and is that, well, there'll be an increase in jobs and there's going to be an expansion in the tax base, because here's a land poor area. Comments about, sort of, let's look at the side of what's ways that this is for the city's greater good. What about those areas?
Discuss tax, tax revenue. One of my points in that is that if you took the Wallace Street, Park Avenue, Chandler Street, Broadway block, mayor happens to live in that, that's all right, and tear that completely down and put up some beautiful new condominiums, they would be really, really lovely. They'd be near the subway station. They'd enhance the tax base incredibly. They'd get 11 times much more taxes out of that area than they do now. But it certainly wouldn't be fair to the mayor or to his neighbors. And the same thing applies to taking down my place. I mean, is it fair to the people who you put out of their homes or out of their businesses just to raise taxes? You can do that with any block in the city, particularly near this new subway station. Rip the damn thing down and put up either new businesses or new condominiums and increase the tax base. That is definitely not a valid reason for putting people out of their livelihood.
Any other quick thoughts about that? We got a couple calls waiting.
Why don't we take the calls first?
Okay.
Sure.
Hello, you're on Dead Air Live. Did you have a comment or question? We'll try it again.
Hello?
Now you're on Dead Air Live. Did you have a comment or question for us?
Yes, I do.
Uh-huh.
And I agree with Danny Greco. And
About what?
thank you. About this paying attention to the people that are living around there, the residents, and the people of Somerville. I think that if they paid more attention to the people of Somerville, instead of these greedy people that are looking for something out of town, and pay attention to the people that are living here.
What do you mean by greedy people?
Greedy people?
Yeah.
Money mad.
Well, you're thinking of specific people?
Quite a few, like rent gouges and these business offices. Now, what are they going to do down there? And I think they've done enough damage in Davis Square already. I've been in one place here now for 44 years, and I've been in Somerville longer than that. And I always went up to Somerville. And when I heard someone mention the shoe store, I bought my shoes there when I got married, 44 years there. We had Kennedy's, we had EMP, we had Kresge's, Woolworths, and all these other big stores, and they chased them out. Why don't they leave the little people alone and let them try to build Davis Square up again?
Okay, I'd like to ask this lady a question. Where do you shop?
Davis Square a lot, most of the time.
Exclusively Davis Square?
Yes, and other squares too, because I can't get everything I want there. But I like my meat store that's there now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good because
like my meat and my eggs there. That's what's the name? McKinnis.
McKinnon's.
Yeah.
It's an excellent store.
Yes, it is.
The reason I bring this up is that according to the demographic studies that have been shown to a lot of people, we're only getting 50% of the people in the area coming down to see us and shop in our stores. So it becomes very difficult to stay in business when the community is not even supporting the stores that they say they're going to support.
Well, I'm sure the banks in Davis Square have a lot of people in Somerville there, and I'm one of them. And I like my bank, and I know there's quite a few other bankers there, and I belong to Sun, and I'm interested in the people of the neighborhoods, all the neighborhoods.
Okay.
And I know Ernie Greco, and that man there knows what he's saying. He's around and he's looking for the people's interest.
The truth will out, okay.
And he knows me.
Okay, thank you for calling in, okay?
Okay, tell him
Thanks
it's
a lot.
Marie.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We're going to run out of time pretty soon, and one of the things that was mentioned is, are there any large developers behind this? I don't know if that's who she was referring to by these gougers. Can we name names? Are there any people? Antonelli's a name you hear. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear that name a lot.
Yeah.
You know, Rocco owns the building we're sitting in. He owns the building across the way from me, which he's owned for about 4.5 years. And I've owned my building. My dad bought it in 1954 and started working in it in 1929. And we're being taken, and Rocco's owned that building across the way for 4.5 years, and there's been 4 or 5 owners since I've known, starting with Roebuck's Garage and Keen's Garage before that. Then there was the Flyer Motors that turned into Precision Motors. Then there was the Ace Electronics, and now there's Rocco Antonelli. So there's been 5 owners of that building. So talk about in and out vacancies and different owners, and that's going to stay, and I'm going to go.
Well, let me
In
ask you-
fairness, it makes no sense.
Yeah, Ernie, quick comment.
I think that's a question that we should ask, for example, when if this new office retail building is built, for example, and the city decides to lease it out or sell it, it would be interesting to see exactly what the procedure is to determine who gets that. We do see the same names, the same developers appearing at the head of the Davis Square Task Force, the head of consultants for the city, this, that, and the other thing. And I think it would be interesting to follow that, and there should be some kind of neighborhood input concerning what kinds of business people the city deals with, or what kinds of business people benefit. Are they the same people who've consistently benefited from almost every kind of change that's occurred within Somerville? And I think that's something to keep an eye on.
Okay, since we're almost out of time, let me give each of you kind of a last comment to make. And Gene, I guess the question is, what do you intend to do in terms of fighting this project? If people are interested in helping you out, what can they do? Funny I should ask.
At the present, I've got postcards made up to send to City Hall. And the postcards essentially say that what I think should happen is, and most of the people around the area think should happen, is that for 2 years, until 2 years after the station opens, we should see how much traffic is going to be generated by the station before we embark on any large-scale disruptive operations, which is, we've had 5 years of that now. And one thing we need to do is settle the dust a little bit, and let's see what's going to happen before we start ripping and tearing and putting people out of their places. And if anybody wants any of these cards, they can get in touch with me at Scott's Garage anytime. Sure, there you go.
Here, final thoughts.
My final thoughts are essentially, I think Davis Square is on the beginning of an economic renaissance that is going to be extremely vital for many people, merchants, residents of the area, and just about anyone who comes in contact. The most unfortunate thing that is occurring is that someone like Gene Scott is being forced into a decision that he does not really want to make. And I think that's very regrettable, but I think for the common good or the greater good, I think it'll be better for Davis Square to come into the 80s.
Okay.
You
Let
have
me
to take me out kicking and screaming, I'll tell you.
Okay, well, let me thank all of you, first of all, for being on the show. Garen Daly from Somerville
John.
Theater, Gene Scott.
Thank you,
Scott's
John.
Garage, Ernie
John,
Greco, resident
pleasure.
and Sun member. Thank you all for being on the show. Got a list of credits of all the
Thank you,
people
Thanks, Ernie. Appreciate it.
from the Somerville Producers Group and others who've been involved in making this show possible, and I'd like to let you know who those people are. This show was produced by Nancy Clover and Stanley Pollock. It was directed by John Pennington, hosted by myself, John Jaffe, floor manager Paul Clover, camera Charlie Tesh and Claire Beach, switcher Nella Waters, audio Greg West, tapes Marcia Green, lighting and set design Paul Clover, Claire Beach, and Paul Serappa, and a special thanks to Joe Clover. And let me call your attention to the fact that this show is going to be rebroadcast on 2 different occasions, this coming Friday, July 15th at 7 o'clock, and 1 week from tonight, July 19th at 9 p.m. Also, 2 weeks from tonight will be another Dead or Alive show. And let me thank all of you for watching, and good night.
When are people going to see that nothing ain't never going to change until somebody finally makes up its mind and stands up and fights? Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Politician. This is Mrs. Travers. I'm calling to see if you can do something about the lights on Arlington Street. They've been out for the past 3 nights.
Mrs. Travers, Arlington Street. You say your lights are out. We'll get to you as soon as we can, Mrs. Travers. Thank you for calling. Why do they think I'll do something for them when they don't even care enough to vote? Hello.
Hi, I live on Myrtle Street, and the lights on our street have been out for at least a couple of nights, and I was wondering if there's something you can do to help me. My name's Joe.
Carboni? Mr. Carboni, that's on Myrtle Street, huh? Mr. Carboni, yes, sir. The lights are out. We'll take care of it right away. Thank you for calling, sir.
We all need our elected officials working for us. Be sure to register to vote today. For information, contact your city hall.
When you're faced with a problem, you simply...